I asked him for the money and he said, absolutely not. There's no way I'm giving you money to open up a nightclub when you're 20 minutes sober. For me, it was way more than opening up a nightclub. It was more about proving myself. And I stayed sober.
Were you ever tempted?
Oh my God, was I tempted? Of course. You know, I would have to buy people blow. I would have to buy people shots, hookers. I'd buy them hookers. I would have to do all these things that is all against what AA tells you.
Your famous friendship with Madonna.
Madonna and I, we went to dinner and she asked me if I would be in the sex book. And she didn't ask Sandra to be in the sex book. And Sandra was like freaking out over our relationship. She told me I couldn't do the sex book. And I was like, that's not happening. So she flew to Miami and then she never spoke to me again.
Welcome to Wham Bam Thank You Pam. I'm your host, Pam Gaslow, writer, former stand-up comedian, and mastermind behind the 50-year plan to success. I also learned the hard way that you don't bring your vibrator to rehab and wrote a book about it. Here we have bold, unfiltered conversations about sex, relationships, personal lives, and pop culture with a sharp, sexy, and comedic edge. Wham Bam Thank You Pam is the wildly entertaining, no-holds-barred discussion you didn't know you needed. Welcome to Wham Bam Thank You Pam. I'm Pam Gaslow. Today's guest is Ingrid Casares. She's legendary nightlife queen, entrepreneur, and the ultimate insider of Miami's most iconic eras. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Pam.
So let's get into it.
Okay. What do you want to know?
I want to know everything.
Okay. Well, we don't have enough time. I have a long life to know everything. But
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit or some of what the nightlife and sort of Miami and the involvement of Miami through the years that I've seen. You know, I was one of the few that are born and raised here. I have lived in other cities, obviously, but this is home. So the evolution of Miami is just incredible. I mean, we were a very, very small town. Like you could drive anywhere. You knew everybody in the city. Like this to me is insane. Like it's good. I mean, it's a metropolitan city now, but before it really wasn't. There was nothing here.
Yeah. I mean, you rose to fame in the 90s Miami club scene, becoming one of the most influential nightlife promoters of your time. And you co-owned and ran iconic clubs like Liquid with your partner, Chris Paciello, who was like the who's who of Hollywood music and fashion. Everyone partied there. So how did you get into nightclub promotion?
Well, I wasn't a promoter. I was an owner.
Okay.
And we would hire promoters to promote for our team. So there's a big difference.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. So anyways, what happened was I was working in the record industry, in the record business when I moved to LA in the early 90s. And from there, I started coming back because of Madonna bought a house. Okay, so back in the 90s, I was working in the music industry for the Estefans, for Gloria and Emilio Estefan, for Sony Records, working in crossing over Latin artists, which wasn't a thing, but like there was no Bad Bunny and Shakira. Like there was Latin music and there was American music or pop music. It never crossed over. Gloria was one of the first. So I worked in that process of crossing over artists from Spanish to English.
How did you get into that?
I've always loved pop culture and I was always really, you know, I knew like what was up and had good taste in music and good taste in fashion. And so I went to school with Gloria Estefan's sister and she just took a chance that I would like be good at doing that. And so she called me up. She took me to lunch at Joe Stone Crab, her and the manager for Sony. And they hired me there to start on their first artist. And then I worked in that field for like 4 years. I also produced music events for VH1 and other stuff like that. So I was involved in that for like 4 years. I knew a lot of people in the industry, obviously, through my connections. And then I was in Miami. So I was living in Los Angeles, but I'd come back and forth because it's my home. So during that time, I went to a club called Risk, and the owner of the club Risk is Chris. And so my friend introduced me. He was this hot boy from New York City. We ended up having an affair, short one, but we were like, whatever, we're better off. He was like, he knew what running a nightclub was about, and I knew people. He knew no one.
Wait, back up. Who did you have the affair with?
With Chris.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So we did that. That's how we started. We started having
I didn't know that part. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
so we
juicy.
started having an affair, which was just gross. No, it wasn't gross. I say that because he's my brother, which was fun, but it wasn't, it just didn't, it was wrong. And from there, he took me out for lunch for my birthday, and he asked me if I wanted to be his business partner. And I knew I wanted to open some sort of business in Miami because there was absolutely nothing here. Like, I keep trying to tell everybody that, but there was nothing. And when I would go to Los Angeles, New York, London, I was like, oh my God, we need to bring either clubs, restaurants, all that. We were so lacking in it. And so I knew I could do it. So he asked me to be his partner. And from then on, we launched Liquid in 95.
Okay.
Which literally changed the way we run nightlife, not only in Miami, but in the world.
And how long did Liquid last? And what was a typical night for you there? Like, were you there all the time? What was it like?
First and foremost, I was sober. Let's put
right.
I was clean and sober.
So from the beginning, when Liquid started, you were sober.
So when I met Chris, I wasn't sober. The reason I went to that club where I met Chris was to buy drugs. Like, I went there looking to buy drugs, and I had a horrible problem with Coke. So we opened in November, which was Thanksgiving. And during the summer, I was really like getting really bad again because I had been sober for like 6 years. And then I had a relapse like a year before that. And I was like really bad living in Los Angeles. And Chris said, look, if we're going to do this, you can't be fucked up in a club. You'll never be able to make it. And I really took that to heart. And I said, you know what? I'll go get sober. I did. I went to Hazleton. I was there for like, I guess 2 weeks. And then I got kicked out for sleeping with one of the guys, for hooking up with one of the guys there. I said, you know what? I got this. And I went to Los Angeles. Back to LA. My parents didn't even know I got kicked out. They thought I was there for the whole 6 weeks, not even Chris, no one. I just moved to Los Angeles, went to AA meetings, and then I got sober. And then I asked my dad, I said, Dad, listen, I didn't tell him that I was opening up a nightclub yet, right? So after the rehab, it was like we were opening in like 2 months. And I asked him for the money. I said, look, I have a chance to invest in this club. And, I was 26 years old. I was broke. Like, I didn't have that kind of money. I had been working in the music business, but I was spending as quickly as I was making it, especially with drugs, So I asked him for the money, and he said, absolutely not. There's no way I'm giving you money to open up a nightclub when you're 20 minutes sober. Like,
right.
And I said, okay. So I made a deal with Chris where he pays me monthly, which is the worst deal I ever made, but it was the only deal. But for me, it was way more than opening up a nightclub. It was more about sort of proving myself. And I stayed sober. And so a typical night there would be like, we would get to the club around 11, I guess. So I also opened up after opening up the club, I also opened up a restaurant called Joya that was really popular. And so we would go to the restaurant, you have dinner there, you bring everybody over to the club, it was just funneling people over to our nightclub. And then you just stay there. I smoked cigarettes at the time, so I would do that. And there was no such thing as Red Bull yet. So I had a little coffee maker in the back. I just pump coffee.
When I hear you tell this story, I mean, to me, nightclubs and drugs and alcohol go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And to think that you did it, but you had a purpose there.
Right.
So you weren't just hanging out.
Correct.
And I get it, because I'm like, how did she do this sober? Like, I would think it was the opposite, but That's incredible that you were able to do that. But you had to because that was your business and you had to run it like a business.
That was my business. So I can't imagine doing that business fucked up. I just can't. It's really hard. Like it's really hard. You have to watch so many things. So there's so many variables, like the door. You have, believe me, you think it's not, but the business of nightclub is just not hanging out there. It all happens during the day.
Right, right,
So
right.
yeah. So there's no way I could have done both successfully.
And how do you think the club scene today compares to back then?
Oh wow. The club scene now is there's no mystique to it at all. Like back then everybody wanted to go behind the velvet rope because they wanted to see, nobody knew what was in there, right? So you had a line out the door that was like 500 people deep and everybody was like what's so, so now you're already, because of social media, unfortunately, there's no mystique. You already know what's behind the velvet rope. So nothing in there. It's very, I find it, people go in there to shoot video, shoot content themselves in the club. They don't get the full experience. And this is
Yeah.
completely different. I think a lot of that, I don't know, that energy, I'd say, because there's a lot of energy in nightclubs, is gone. It's just not there anymore, unfortunately.
And would you ever consider getting back into that business again, or that's just,
Oh, that's a young person's
yeah, yeah,
business.
yeah.
It really
I
is.
know.
Even though it's a lot more corporate now, you don't have to be there. Like we had to be there because we were the face. So you had to be there every night. I said you couldn't be there. Celebrities come, they want to go see, hang out with you. Like you're, people come, they want to see your face there. Doesn't work. Now you don't need
And
to.
right, right, right. And how did you, was it easy to do it sober? And were you ever tempted?
Oh my God, was I tempted? Of course. I would have to buy people blow. I would have to buy people shots. I would have to buy people, like I would have to do all these things that you do as a nightclub owner. Hookers. I'd buy them hookers. Like I would have to do all these things that is all against what AA tells you and NA tells you. Like you're literally in the barbershop, you know. You know what I mean by that
Trying
expression?
not to get a haircut?
Correct. I was in that for 8 years or longer, 10 years.
And then what happened? And then where did you go?
So
And
what
then what
happened
happened?
was, and I don't want to get too much into it, and we have a documentary coming out about the experience of liquid. And what happened was my business partner, who had been involved in a murder robbery in Staten Island in 1991, he had come to Miami to sort of like forget about, like, hopefully he thought no one gets away with crime, really. Honestly, I swear to God, it's impossible. But he wanted to restart his life. He was young, he was 23 years old. And then eventually, when you commit crime with more than one person, people start talking. And
Right.
then the feds raided us in 2000 when I was opening up a club in Palm Beach. And I got pregnant with my son literally at the same time. So by this time I had 5 clubs, and I also was managing DJs. And so when the feds raided us and Chris went to prison, that's when I ended up stepping back, becoming a mom, and then I did other things in that space, but not in nightclubs.
And how is that transition from nightclub queen every night, buying people blow and hookers to becoming a mom?
It was refreshing in the beginning. It was, I was 35 and I was exhausted. I was living, my whole clock was backwards. You live,
I'm sure.
I always had the shades drawn up, and now it was an adjustment period. And then I found a way to be I moved to hotels in hospitality in another capacity. So I did that for about 10 years till 2010. And I did relapse in that time. So there's a lot of,
Yeah.
the purpose wasn't there anymore as much. I think, I suffered from what people in the program say, you think you're cured type of thing.
Oh, yeah. I relapsed after 8 years. It's not
Correct.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And the purpose of having to maintain this empire that we had built wasn't there anymore. You know what I mean? It was like, I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
Do you think you were a little bit lost without that
Yeah,
and
I
with
think
an
so.
identity?
100%. I think that was a big adjustment. It was an adjustment. My fix always has been drugs and alcohol. So something was wrong, and that's where I went to.
Yeah, it's hard. And I remember, did you think, because like when I relapsed, I kind of always knew I had to come back to AA because I was like, okay, I'm either going to be high every day, all day for the rest of my life,
Correct.
or I have to get sober again. Did you think
Yeah,
that?
a
Or
hundred
did you?
percent. I mean,
Yeah,
there was just like there was no way I was going to be able to be drinking and drugging for the rest of my life. It's like I
it's a
knew
full-time
eventually
job.
you have to stop at one point. It was a matter of when you jumping off that train, right? And by the way, it's like what people don't understand, and I think people think that they can just stop. It's like, no, you can't just stop. I wish
Right.
you can't
Just
pick
don't do
up.
that.
Once you're,
Because,
I
right,
mean, once you quit, I can stay quit, but getting quit is the hardest part. It really is.
100%. Just stay quit. Don't do it.
Yeah,
And I always share, like, I relapsed a few times because I was bored, and I'm like, find something else to do. That's my
correct.
suggestion. Anything. I don't care if you take a walk, it will pass. Don't get high because you're bored in this moment. Biggest mistake ever.
Correct. If you play the movie in your head where it's going to end, just play that movie in your head, because I
Yeah.
promise you, you're going to lose everything. Even if it's not even material, it could be just emotionally you
Oh,
lose
yeah.
everything.
100%. So, all right, let's talk about your famous friendship with Madonna, because
Okay.
obviously we have to
Okay.
do that. How did you guys first meet and what drew you to each other?
Okay. So I met M in 90, I guess it was 1991. I had a friendship with Sandra Bernhard that I met in Miami. And she was this really funny comedian, kind of like really smart. There was a lot of things that I really liked about her. It was fun. She said, "You should move to Los Angeles." I met in Miami, and literally in a month, I had packed all my bags and moved to Los Angeles. I was ready to get out of Miami. It was too
Right.
small a town for me. And so I moved out there and I lived at her house. And she had invited me during that time it was Madonna's birthday, which is August 16th. And I guess I moved in July, and then I met M in August. And that's how we met.
Okay.
And then what happened was, cut to December of that same year, Madonna was shooting the Sex book.
I want to talk about that's on my list.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So Madonna was shooting the Sex book, and she asked me when I was with Sandra. We were having dinner, and we had dinner with Stephen Meisel, who's the photographer of the Sex, famous photographer. And Madonna and we went to dinner, and she asked me if I would be in the Sex book, and she didn't ask Sandra to be in the Sex book. And that night, when we got home to the hotel, Sandra was like ballistic, like really pissed off. She wasn't asked to be in this, and whatever. So I didn't pay much attention to it because she gets ballistic about everything. By the way, when I was living with Sandra, she would get on the phone early in the morning and talk to her friends like Isaac Mizrahi and Andre Leon Talley. Those were her friends, and talk shit about M. And I was like, I thought these people were friends. And they would just go off about M. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, I'm such a loyalist. I was like, are these people friends or they're not friends? Like, what's the deal here? Anyways, calling her no talent and all this crazy stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So she asked me to be on the Sex book, and she knew I was a runner. And so I was staying at the hotel, and she would call my hotel room and ask me to go running. And Sandra would get really angry, like, you can't go. And I was like, you have no idea who I am. Like, you can't tell me no. You're not going to tell me what to do. So she would say, and I would leave. And anyways, Madonna and I just started hanging out, and Sandra was like freaking out over our relationship. And I didn't understand if it was because she was intimidated that Madonna liked me. It was so high school, by the way. It was
Right.
like, was she threatened by her and Madonna not being friends anymore, or threatened by me and Madonna's friendship? Like, I didn't know where the insecurity came from, but there was definitely an insecurity there. And so what happened was she told me that I can't hang out with her, with M, because Madonna and I obviously got along really well. And so I told her that that's never going to happen. You're not going to tell me who I can be friends with. And so, cut to they were shooting the sex book in Miami. I flew to Miami. She told me I couldn't do the sex book. And I was like, that's not happening. So she flew to Miami, and then she never spoke to me again, which is ridiculous. And then she went on a tirade for the next 10 years, not even dissing me. She would diss M. Just a tirade, like in her comedy shows, every interview she did, they always asked her about Madonna, and she always just trashed her. And so it was horrible the way she handled it, but we never said anything. Like, Madonna never said anything. I never said anything about her. And we always took the high road.
Yeah, it does sound very high school. Like this could have happened with any
Correct.
women, not famous or not.
Correct.
And if she was just like, oh, okay, go shoot that book with
Yes.
Madonna, it would have been fine. And
It
you
would have
guys
been
could have stayed
perfect.
friends. Right.
And if they would have asked her to be in the book, like, let's say I want Sandra and Ingrid to be in the book, like she would have been perfectly fine with it. But it was so about that really like pissed her off.
Did you have any hesitation about being in the book? Did you know what it was going to be about, or were you just like, yes, I'll do it?
I was more like, yes, I'll do it. And I knew, well, I had gone to see them shooting like a couple times beforehand, like her hitchhiking naked down, you know, that famous painting. That famous
where was
photograph.
that? Was that in Miami?
That was in Miami, yeah. That was up in Golden Beach.
Okay, so what happened when Madonna's on the road in Golden Beach hitchhiking? Like, were there people stopping?
Well, remember, this is Miami in '93. Believe it or not, it was the middle of
no
the day, and there was barely anybody out there. It was so weird. And yeah, some people
but there had
honking,
to be people. Yeah, I
honking and whoa, like what is going on type of thing. But it wasn't
so
like
you were watching that, and were you like, "This is insane," or were you like, "This is amazing"?
This is amazing. I was like, this is insane, but this is pretty iconic as well, right? But it's just stark naked. Yeah. So I figured, listen, a book called Sex by Madonna in 1992. I knew what she was trying to do. Like, it was her fantasies. This is going to either go incredibly well or it's going to be a big bust. And it was both. You know, she got a lot of flack for it. A lot of flack. Believe me when I tell you, a lot of flack. And she never regretted it. Never.
That's what I was just going to ask you now.
Actually, she's saying, like, remember, we didn't have Twitter or Facebook or any of that shit where she can just like slam people when they're talking. So she wrote a song. I didn't know I couldn't talk about sex. It was a very famous song. I'm not your bitch. Don't hang your shit on me. Like, it was a really like, Madonna is the type of person, she goes through things. Like, she's not going to let anything or anyone, like, she could see through it. And she just kept going.
That book, I remember when it came out, and it was so iconic. And I was probably in my 20s, and I remember calling this guy and going to his house and like, oh, I have the sex book. Let's look at it. Like a way to hook up with somebody. It's so funny.
Now it's Instagram. Now it's Instagram. Like, she was so ahead of her time, because if you go to Instagram now, every picture is the same.
Yeah. So I even kept a copy of the unopened book with like with the
foil in it.
Yes,
so, you know, that was like the foil for, and remember, you're in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. So that foil was for a condom wrapper, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
So all the money was gone to research for HIV. I mean, her heart was in the right place.
No, that's awesome. I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
But like, how much direction did Madonna give versus Stephen Meisel? Like, was it obvious? I'm sure it was Madonna's vision.
It was a definite collab. I remember when she came there and said, are you comfortable taking off your clothes? And I said, I'm not. I mean, I can go to a certain point, and I was shooting with Isabella Rossellini, myself, and Diane van Furstenberg's daughter, which is Tatiana. Yeah. The three of us shot kind of in suits and stuff like that on the beach in Miami.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it sounds like it was a setup for an orgy. Were there any moments that didn't make the final cut?
No, not at all. It was really it was just a normal photo shoot. There was no, like, we were wearing 3-piece suits. So it was more
Right.
like Anais Nin type of stuff, if you know who that
I know
is.
that.
So after I shot the book, I didn't never told my parents that I did it. Remember, I'm young. I'm 26, 27. I'm my son's age. And so my mother sees the headlines, and it wasn't even about the photographs, because in the photographs I wasn't like, it was just photographs. Yes, I was kissing him, but whatever. It was more about the letters. She wrote these letters, these Dear John letters, and it was all about her fantasy of being with me. And then someone left the book in my parents' house anonymously. They mailed it to them and said, "Your daughter is a disgrace," type of thing, whatever. It
Oh,
was
wow.
so whatever,
Did it change anything for you professionally or personally at the time?
no, nothing.
Okay.
It didn't change anything professionally, personally. I think obviously the media was more curious about who I was. And, New York, I was constantly in the press at that time. Who's that girl type of thing.
Yes.
So,
I remember.
yeah, so it was like a page 6 fodder. And then I think that was another reason, by the way, of me, beside, doing the clubs and having my own life, was really important to me because of that relation. Like, it was always Ingrid, Madonna's gal pal, and so that was it, instead of having my own identity. And I really wanted to have my own identity.
That's something else I was going to ask you. Yeah. How was it being friends with somebody like
That
Madonna
famous,
and
yeah. I
people?
mean, she was the
Yeah,
most famous. She's,
she
it's
was.
like a name like Coca-Cola. I always thought it was normal because she makes it normal. Like, she's not surrounded by bodyguards.
And were you guys friends? Were you more than friends? Like,
We were
what was the
friends.
relationship?
No, Madonna and I have always been friends. And people just assumed, because they had these letters and the sex book, they assumed it was more. But Madonna's straight.
Right.
She doesn't like girls.
What's one thing about Madonna that most people would be surprised to know about?
She's very, very funny. Very funny. She has the best hearing. Like, you could whisper in your room and she'll go, "What are you talking?" Like, she has the most insane ears I've ever met you cannot say something without her hearing it.
Okay.
And she's like a Midwestern girl. I mean, we would go to the movies in the Omni, right? Just the two of us by ourselves. And you're talking about peak Madonna. And we would just go, like, everything was normal, which I loved. There was no fanfare. There's no, she doesn't fancy cars, and she doesn't buy any of that, like, buy into that stuff.
I was always like, I want to be friends with her. Like, she just seems so cool.
Yeah, super cool, down to earth. We would go to the clubs, go to the movies, go to restaurants. It was always very just normal. Like, she just happened to be very famous.
Right, exactly. So when your parents saw the book, what did they?
Never saw it.
They still never saw it.
They still never saw it. They never opened it.
Okay.
They never saw it. They just
Interesting.
Yeah. And they met, of course, and then Madonna came to, like, my parents' anniversary party and danced with all the Cuban old men, and she just became like part of the family.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what's going on now? Like, you've lived so many lives. What chapter are you in now?
So I just
what are you
finished,
excited about?
I had invested in a company called Poppy, and I worked also doing the marketing here in Miami. And in 5 years, we sold the company for $2 billion.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And what are you doing for them exactly?
I was doing their marketing, meaning I was doing all the grassroots, getting people. When I first came to in 2020, I invested in Poppy in 2020 in the middle of COVID, and we were all direct to consumer. And so we didn't have any brick and mortar at all. And then I started bringing coolers filled with Poppy to pickleball courts and to flag football games and to all that. I literally strategized and just did a campaign in Miami to get everybody to drink Poppy. And it became, within 4 years, that company went from $10 million to $100 million a year.
Insane.
In 4 years.
That's amazing.
So I'm just excited. It was like a baby that me and a whole team, trust me, I only did the Miami part, but we had a whole team of women. And now I'm on to the next project.
So now that it's sold, you're moving on from that.
I move on from that, and then now I'm gonna more will be revealed of what my next project, but I have one lined up, which is great.
Okay. And you have a documentary coming out.
I do.
Tell
Documentary's
me about that.
it's coming out hopefully in the next year, and other great surprises that I'm working on. So
Well,
hopefully it's a little bit of my life. I hope I was able to entertain you a little bit.
no, this was great. I'm excited to see what you're doing next.
Yes.
One final question. If you can go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think if I were to my younger self one piece of advice, I wouldn't have gotten as much sun.
That's a good
That's a
one.
very good one. Especially growing up in the 80s, it was all that iodine and
Yeah.
all that.
No sun, no cigarettes.
No sun, no cigarettes. I don't know about drugs and alcohol. I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't go through all that.
Right. I guess it's true because I'm like, oh, I should have got sober early. I mean, I got sober at 26 and I'm like, it would have been, what would I have done? I wouldn't have done anything. I don't know.
Yeah,
Even though 26 is so young still.
So young. And by the way,
Yeah.
you would have never found the tools that help you in life if you didn't go through, you know what I mean?
Because for me, I feel like it took so long to become a confident, less fearful person. It took so long. Just because you put the substance down, you don't change overnight. And I think people don't realize that. Like you need time to grow up,
Correct.
Because emotionally I was still 16, even though I was 26.
Correct.
And it doesn't happen overnight. So
yeah, and life is long, and everything that you thought, there were times where you thought it was the end of the world and it really wasn't. You get through things.
Especially the older you get and you're realizing, you look back and you're like, I can't believe I was so depressed about this or that at this age. And now I'm like, you're getting older, and that's like the one thing you literally can't change.
Correct.
Right?
They don't prepare you for that.
Right. I'm like, I could have changed so many things, but I was busy being miserable about bullshit. And now I'm like, now I can't change the fact that I'm just getting older,
Oh, yeah. And you're going to continue to get older. But as long as you get wiser, it's all good.
Yes. I 100%. That's what you get. Wisdom comes with age.
Yep. Wisdom comes with age.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, and you're awesome. And I love you because I think I love your personality and how blunt you are and how you just say it how it is.
Yes.
And make
You
me
will
laugh.
always get the truth from me. That's for sure.
You're a little bit tough love, and I like that and I respect that a lot because I'm the type of person that needs something like that in their life.
Yes.
So thank you, Ingrid.
No, you're welcome.